Hey, good afternoon. Happy 1 o'clock. We had an appointment at 1 o'clock and it is 1 o'clock. I am so happy to see you all. So here's my thought today. I have a big long list of about 16 different strategies to make sure that your buyers come out on top. But what I thought we would do, especially with a smaller group of people, is really make it more of a mastermind, right? Instead of me just reading out some ideas, let's have a conversation around what is working for you. And I will, Marissa's going back and forth with her head. What are you telling me?
No, because I'm like super like butthurt about the market right now and very very fascinated by the whole thing. So I don't have anything nice to say. I came here to hear everybody else's solutions.
well, there you go. So one of the ways, so let's kind of start there, right? Let's start there. And so the idea is, I want to open it up and kind of have each of you just tell me what is working. If you find that nothing is working for you, well, then that's kind of the answer, isn't it? And we'll go through these 16 points. You will get all 16 of at least the points that I have based on listening to you guys talk, based on taking notes in other masterminds, based on information we heard at Family Reunion, right? That's where my list came from. However, let's start from the perspective of mindset, because I have heard something about like my head's in a bad place a whole bunch of times in the last couple of days, certainly the last week or two. And so one of the strategies that you need to employ to make sure that your buyers are the winners is to keep yourself as much as possible in a positive frame of mind about what the market is bringing us, right? It's always got to be opportunity. It's always got to be, you know what, we do know how to win. Here are the things you can do to win, even if it feels like you're doing all of those things and still losing, right? And we're going to talk about that kind of towards the end, because I want to go through all of these strategies and then kind of tie it up with a bow, saying, all right, so then what do you do if you feel like you're doing all of these things and you're still losing? It is a reality today that there are, for most properties, more buyers than there are houses, right? So that's just real. That's just real. And grumping about it doesn't change it. So we have to kind of make sure that we're in a headspace that recognizes that it's just a battle, right? You gotta put your armor on and head out into the arena and make sure make sure your sword is sharpened. But that's hard to say. Say that 3 times fast. Make sure your sword is sharpened, and that your armor is intact to kind of go into battle. And make sure that your buyers understand that they're going into battle, right? Setting expectations is probably the thing I don't have to talk about, but we will, just to get us started. If you're not setting expectations with your buyers, and here's what's interesting is that I know for a fact that not everyone is. I spoke to somebody literally this morning and I said, okay, well, what was the conversation at the buyer consult? Well, what do you mean? I hoped they didn't mean what's a buyer consult. They didn't. Phew, we got through that one, right? But instead, what they meant was, well, what do you mean setting expectations? I said, well, when you had the buyer consult and you understood what it is the buyers were looking for, did you give them the 411 on exactly what the market is like for them today, what they can expect? And the answer I got was an interesting one. They said, no, because I didn't want to scare them away. Guys, I get that. And yet, if you're not setting proper expectations right up front, right? If someone's going to be scared away regarding the arena they're entering, you might as well know that up front. They might as well know that up front. It saves everybody a whole lot of time, effort, heartache, and ultimately resentment, right? Somebody else recently said to me, you know what, I'm struggling because at some point the buyers are just looking at me and looking at me as though it's my fault. And I asked the same question. I said, well, talk to me about the expectations you set up going into this whole relationship, going into this, this journey that you're on together. This person didn't really set many expectations. Like, well, sure, if you don't set the expectations properly up front, at some point, who else are they going to look at? Because you didn't tell them up front that ultimately this is what you can expect. So that when they get what you told them, you seem like a prophet instead of the enemy. It's write this down, because this is an absolute truth in life and in business. Conflict only arises from unmet expectations. Conflict only arises from unmet expectations.
Yeah, they're going to thank you if you're honest with them up front.
Exactly right. Maybe they choose to sit it out, right? And you can't allow your want or need to sell a house determine the expectations that you set with your clients up front. And that's sometimes what we do, right? We're human. We have a desire to sell these folks a house. We have a desire to earn. We have a desire to buy food and pay the mortgage and all those things. Except if we're not giving them the right tools to fight up front, they arrive unprepared. Like now they're like, you know, Gladiator. They're like Russell Crowe going into the arena, and you know, you gave him a Speedo.
Are you not entertained?
And a toothbrush, right? So a Speedo and a toothbrush don't get the job done in the Gladiator arena. You have to arm them with the right tools, and a lot of that is expectation setting.
Hey, Rick, this is Lou.
Hey, Lou.
You're absolutely right. On the recent deal that I had, I took some advice from Debbie maybe a month ago. She had a Zoom, and you know, said that the market is just supply and demand. So I did for my buyers, as I said, the new low offer is the asking price.
That's right.
And, you know, so we went through, you know, I set the expectation up front, but it took a while for them to realize that, you know, they made a low offer and they were losing out. And it took a while, a lot of gas, to get them to where I needed to be. And, you know, eventually we won the deal by using the escalation addendum. In Trumbull, there was a house for $350. We bid $365 plus best offer, $5,000 over best offer. And we got the deal at $381. The appraisal came out to $365, and the sellers are willing to come down to $365. But, you know, exactly what you're saying, you know, I'm working with a couple other buyers now, setting that expectation, you know, and you know, they haven't been in the market a long time. They still think that, you know, it's $550, you could offer, you know, $500. And
yeah, that doesn't work anymore, right?
It doesn't work anymore. And it's exactly what Debbie, you know, she said it doesn't work. It's a pure supply and demand. I remember she saying that, and that's determining the market, even though the house, you know, clearly, you know, a couple of places you don't even, you know, you needed to build another house, you know, redo the whole thing.
Yeah.
But,
well,
you know,
so the reality, I think what ultimately what Lou is putting on the table for us is, because he just mentioned a bunch of strategies. So let's do this. I'll run through these strategies. If for no other reason than I don't want Marissa to get mad at me. So I like your hair up that way, by the way. You remind me of IT Regini.
It's the dirty hairdo, so thank you.
So expectation setting, clearly important, right? I love Lou's phrase, it's a supply and demand environment, right? And right now there is low supply and high demand. So ultimately that means that you are entering the fray of competition, right? Remember, competition and negotiation are two sides of a seesaw. You either have one or you have the other. Whether you're representing a buyer or a seller, you have one or the other. And in this environment for buyers, it's not about negotiation. It's not about, what can you do for me? It's not about, here's what I think or I want, because frankly, none of that is relevant, right? It's just not relevant. I had somebody say to me last week, you know what, I'm just so irritated because my buyers made an offer on a property that had been sitting for a little while. And then, ironically, all of a sudden, magically, all of a sudden there were, 3 offers on the property. I said, and so talk to me about what was the strategy? So, the buyers and I, so right there, I knew where we were going. The buyers and I, we're going to come back to that, because that's a mindset conversation, right? The buyers and I just knew that the listing agent was totally bluffing on that. Oh, is that right? And so what is it that, how did you proceed? Well, we made an offer below asking. And what happened? Well, they went to, highest and best, quote unquote. I said, okay. And so what did you do next? Well, the buyers and I, we knew that it was a bunch of crap. And so we didn't do anything. We just stuck where we were. Great. And what was the end result? Well, they say they sold it to somebody else. They say, no, you lost because you didn't believe in supply and demand, right? And so guys, be really cautious. That whole world of everyone's lying to me, and I choose not to play in that. Do you get caught in somebody exaggerating, an offer or the extent of offers sometimes? I'm certain that one does. However, isn't the goal for the buyer to get the yes on the house they want to live in? I thought that was the goal, right? And so if the goal is for them to get a yes, it's not really relevant how many offers there are, who can prove it, it's the nature of the beast today. And if they don't like the nature of the beast, they can simply choose not to play. But choosing to play and then playing in a market that was a year and a half ago is a waste of everyone's time. And again, is a bummer for everybody involved, because then everyone gets frustrated and irritated. So choose not to participate in that kind of stuff, because it's silliness. And be careful about taking sides. You need to remain as objective as possible. Are you advocating for your buyers? Yes, of course. But my concern is that sometimes some of us fall so far into the well of advocacy that we forget to tell them just the facts. We get wrapped up in, let me protect them. Oh my goodness, I would never pay $50,000 over the asking price for this house. Well, no one asked you. You're not buying the house. It's not your money, right? Now, some of you are listening to me saying, all right, so now he's like on the pulpit again. But guys, I want you to be clear about the fact that the buyer said to you, I want to live in that house. And so as long as you say back to the buyer, look, everything I'm about to discuss with you in terms of strategies to win are strategies to win based on your desire to be in that house. If at any point in time, any of these strategies are outside of the bounds of how you're willing to play, then just let me know and we'll cross that strategy off the list. But here's the list of strategies. Don't not give the strategies. Let them pick the strategies, because it's not about you and it's not about what you think. Right? You've all heard me tell the story 1,000 times of the house that I still currently live in, that I had to pay $47,000 over the asking price to live in, and it was my own listing. And how everybody told me I was a fool. That wasn't helpful to me. I actually resented the people who said it. People who were trying to help, saying, I really think you're crazy paying that much money over the asking price for this house. Well, that's lovely. I didn't ask you to buy the house for me. It's my money. I'll spend it how I choose. All right, moving on. So let's run through these and instead of kind of starting with your successes, what we'll do is I'll run through this list, and if you have a thought or a, yes, I just used that and it was absolutely totally positive and worked, and here's my plus to it, jump in, just unmute and wait for me to call on you, and we'll go with that, do it that way. So strategy number one is pay more. Like a duh, right? And yet strategy number one is pay more. Recognize that in today's market with multiple offers on almost every single property, the list price, and Lou said this too, the list price is now the minimum expectation that the seller has. It's the minimum expectation that the seller has. And if you're not stating that right up front to your buyers, I think you're missing an opportunity, right? Set the stage with that. That's part of expectation setting. Please note, for all intents and purposes, the list price, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, is going to be the minimum expectation that the seller has. That way, they're not going in there looking at the $650 ticket price and thinking $575 in their head, because you've already set the expectation that $650 is $650. And typically $650 today is more like $710, right? So setting that stage. Strategy number two. You know what? Let's go with strategy 1A real quick. So strategy 1A falls into that same kind of category of paying more. And for some of you, you're struggling because you have buyers who are in that kind of 325 to 350 range, and you're showing them houses in the 325 to 350 range. Guess what? If you're showing them houses that are listed for 325 and 350, and that's what they can afford, they're going to be the losers every time, because those houses are all going for 385 to 400 or whatever, right? So strategy 1A, when I say pay more, sometimes what that means is adjust buyers' expectations. If they can afford 350, they should be looking at houses around $300,000, so that they can then be the winners when they can push to their upper limits in the 340s to 350. Right? Set them up for the win. Don't set them up for the lose. That sometimes is a rough conversation because people have to adapt their expectations about the house they're purchasing. However, if they want to be successful today, they need to recognize that if they have $350 to spend, they need to be looking at houses that are coming on the market in the low threes, right? So that's just kind of another thought. So one is pay more. 1A is adjust the expectations and the price range of your buyers so that their upper end actually sets them up for the win. What I would say is anywhere from 5 to 10% as an adjustment. 5 to 10% as an adjustment down so that they can be the winners when they add that 5 to 10% back in. Strategy number two. Use statistics to prep your buyers for what they're getting into. We talked about expectation setting, right? Here's what works less. What works less is that if I sit across from Alice and tell her that almost every property that we see going under agreement in this price range goes under agreement within 24 hours with multiple offers and ends up typically 5 to 10% above asking in terms of the number that the seller is accepting. If I tell her that, she can either believe me or not believe me. It depends on how long she's known me, how trustworthy I seem. For some people, how fast I might talk, which could be trouble for me because Alice may be like, oh, you know what? This dude is way too slick, right? He's trying to totally sell me on something. Remember that sometimes when you meet someone for the first time, your industry's reputation precedes you. And I don't mean that with any disrespect to our industry. And yet, let's just stay in the realm of real here. Sometimes our industry's reputation is not as stellar as your own. And so people hear real estate agent and they think you're selling them on a property, right? Especially if it's the first time you're meeting with them, that you haven't given them an opportunity to understand that you are their fiduciary. You haven't given them the time it takes to sometimes build that trust. Right? So here's how you build trust faster in the beginning. You set that expectation, you give them that information, and then you back it up in that same exact conversation with cold hard facts, with data, with statistics. So now I'm sitting in front of Alice. I just said what I said, and she's kind of looking at me like with squinty eyes thinking, okay, well, maybe. And I said, you know, if it would be helpful, Alice, I've actually prepared a little report about what's happened here in the last 30 to 45 days to give you an idea of what other buyers have been experiencing in this price range. And we kind of go through, you know, this one under agreement in 24 hours, this one under agreement in, 36 hours. I happen to know this one had 17 offers, right? That we were on a conversation. This one sold inside of my office. We knew there were 42 offers. There were 9 offers. There were 6 offers, right? And you give them some statistics and data, and then you show them the solds. Here in your price range, here are the last 10 properties that have sold. Can you see the average list to sale ratio is, and then you point at it and you don't say it out loud and you wait for them to say it. And they say 101%, does that mean over asking? Yeah, on average over asking, right? Which is why when I say that the minimum expectation that most sellers have today is their list price or better, there's the backup for it. Right? So just as a strategic tip for you in consulting people, the important pieces, the important numbers are more impactful if you pause and allow them to say the words out loud than you saying it and them hearing it. Remember, people only retain 7 to 12% of what they hear. However, that number like triples based on what they say. So that's just a from a how the brain works kind of strategy. Make sure that when you're reviewing statistics that you pause and just point. What I used to do is I used to turn it upside down and put it in front of the person sitting across the table from me and pretend I couldn't read it. And the average list to sale ratio for the last 45 days is, I am so sorry, Alice, I can't quite read upside down. What does that say? And then Alice says, oh, 101%. Yeah, wow, 101%. Just little strategies, just little tips. But now when we go out and see properties, Alice she heard me say it, then she saw the proof, and then she said out loud, over asking 101%. So that when we pull up to that first house, what's in her head is 101%. See how that works? So back up what you're saying with statistics, because I love you and trust you. However, not everybody you sit across from loves you and trusts you, at least not initially, right? And again, just keeping it real, that's just a reality we face. We interact with the public. And for some people, has nothing to do with you. It's that people take longer periods of time to create a bond and a trust with someone. So give them data and facts to back up the things you're saying. And don't be insulted if people look at you a little sideways and you have to back it up with stats. Frankly, I would expect it and then be surprised when it doesn't happen. Number 3. Marissa, go ahead.
I just wanted to add to that a little bit because I had a conversation about this with Michael Church the other day.
Yes.
And, I was expressing my frustrations to him. And he was saying that he's having these consultations with a lot of buying clients. And, he's at liberty to do this because he has volume, right? But he's even saying, like, I'm telling a lot of people right now that, these are conditions. Here's what you have to do to purchase a home. And if you don't have the stomach for that right now, or if that's not the right plan for you right now, like, I don't think you should buy a house right now. Mm-hmm. And just turning them down. Like, I'd rather like disappoint you now, right, than like put you through this horrible, like, painful process. And maybe we can revisit this like in a year or 2 years, or maybe the world's going to change in 6 months. Like, this will be different. And he's all about relationships, right? So he did this in the last, before the big recession when the market was crazy. He did that, and he said, he had a lot of people come back around to him, ready to buy after they recovered financially because he built loyalty telling them that.
Yeah, one of the best ways you can build trust is to say something completely unexpected, right? Completely unexpected. Now, I will tell you, my version of what Marissa just said is slightly different. And my version of that would be to lay all the conditions out, explain 110% what you're going to do to need to get this job done. And then I would ask a question. Instead of making a statement, I would ask a question. From a consultant's chair, I would then ask, based on everything that we've just talked about and the knowing the arena that we're headed into, is this something you have the stomach for, right? And then close my mouth and wait for an answer. And if the answer is yes, great, because now I can remind them that they chose that as they get frustrated. If the answer is no, then I would continue the conversation saying, you know what, I completely understand that. So if you're unwilling to stomach this environment, let me ask you a few more questions. How long are you willing to wait for the environment to change? Right, and maybe they say, we can just rent for another year. Excellent. So a year from now, if the supply and demand environment has changed and interest rates have gone up, how would that impact your buying power, your buying decision, right? Because you have to help them recognize that just because interest rates are where they are today, if they don't like the supply and demand version of the conversation, waiting a year, they may like the supply and demand version better, but interest rates may be back up to 4.5 or 5, right? We just don't know. And so helping them make a decision based on all the facts, not just, yes, there might be more inventory in a year. Does that help balance that a little bit? Okay. Tammy, do you agree with that a year from now, it might as well be 10 years from now in terms of interest rates?
Yeah, they're projecting with the talk of inflation that the rates are going to be like high 3s by like the summer. So they go up quick. I mean, 1 week we're 3.25, the next week we're 3.5. And it's not like we get an email that says, oh, by the way, just want to let you know rates are going to go up 0.5%. So yeah, the interest rate, it can definitely have a huge impact on their buying power.
Right, right. And the other thing I'll mention is even if interest rates don't go up a year from now, you don't know where the pricing is going to be. If we spend an entire year, an additional year in an altered supply and demand environment, well, that sends prices up. And so a year from now, as we're entering the spring all over again, when typically we see the most activity, what if it's not different? Or what if it is different from an inventory perspective, but we're starting at prices being here instead of here, right? So all those things you have to help them consider. And if they still decide to wait a year, I am 110% on their side. As a consultant, I'm never attached to the outcome, right? Never attached to the outcome as long as they're making the best decision for them with all the facts. I just don't want to necessarily skew the facts and leave out the what if scenario for let's wait a year, because I think it's important as a consultant to help them paint a picture of what it could look like. It could be better, and yet it could not be. I'm curious, are you willing to roll those dice? How are you playing those odds? All right, strategy number 3, waive as much as possible. Waive as much as possible. I know some of these don't seem earth-shattering, and yet I'm still hearing things from some people who are struggling saying the words to the buyer clients, okay, what can you waive? What are you willing to waive? Because it sounds pushy and it sounds like I'm not protecting them. Guys, remember, your job is not to protect people. Your job is to give them all of the facts and help them make the best decision possible for them based on those facts. That doesn't mean withhold information, right? That's not what I'm saying. However, you need to give them all of the facts, and waiving things like inspections and appraisal contingencies and mortgage contingencies, if they are able, right? Maybe what you do is if Tammy's writing the loan, you wrap her into that conversation to say, look, we've got to be as competitive as possible. You need to give us, what are the odds here that something is going to go sideways? Are we at like a 90% okay on this mortgage based on everything you see? What else do you need to know from us? Is there a way that we can actually have this pre-underwritten, right? Can we do even more than a pre-qualification or a pre-approval and send as much information to the underwriter as possible for like a TBD loan, where now all you need is a stamp on from an appraiser saying it appraises and we're good, right? How are you helping them prep to be able to waive some of these things? I do mean inspections, and I do see Alice and Tammy and Karen. I'm going to get to you guys in just half a second. I do mean inspections, and I do mean appraisals, and I do mean mortgages. Tammy, talk to us about the waiving of the mortgage contingency, and then Karen and Alice will come to you.
So I wanted to say, I've had situations where the clients have said to me, oh, I didn't even realize that was an option, because I know sometimes it might be a newer agent or an agent who's afraid to have that conversation. And the clients have said to me, I didn't even know that was an option. And I got to be careful because I don't want to instill doubt in them either. So as far as waiving the mortgage contingency, there is a risk involved. If they lose their job the day of closing, yeah, they're going to lose their deposit. So it's possible, but it's unlikely. I've written thousands and thousands of mortgages over the last 20 years, and I can count on my hand how many have been denied. And I usually know there's going to be a problem before we even get started. I've never, knock on wood, I have never been surprised. I have never been like, wow, where did that come from? So when I tell you we run it through automated underwriting, I would bet my dog's life on it. And those of you who know me, that's a big deal. I could tell you, but there's still that smidge of risk involved too.
Yeah. Well, and here's I want to make 2 points based on what Tammy just said. First of all, human beings experience risk every single day that they are alive, right? Every day that you put your 2 feet out of your bed and start walking across your bedroom to start your day, you're experiencing risk, right? There's a risk of an earthquake. Do we have many earthquakes in Connecticut? No. And yet, is it possible that an earthquake could shake your house and knock a tree on is it possible that all of a sudden solar flares can shoot out of the sun and incinerate us all? Of course. And so it leads me to my strategy. And I have used this for 20 years. And it's the strategy of possible versus probable, right? And I think as a script with your buyers, frankly, it works with your sellers, it works with your kids, it works with your spouse, it works with almost anything you can think of. But the script of possible versus probable is, are you willing and able to waive any of these things? Well, I don't know. Is there risk in waiving my inspection contingency? They talk to Tammy about it. She talks them through. She outlines what the risk is. Great. And so knowing that something, it's always possible that something could happen that sends it sideways. And yet, based on everything we just discussed, do you see how it's far less probable? Weighing those 2 things, are you willing to waive the mortgage contingency? Right? Appraisal contingency, inspections, probable versus possible. It's possible that you could have a car accident driving to the office. However, it's not terribly probable, or you wouldn't do it, right? So just remember that as a script, weighing probable versus possible, because I use it in decision-making and in script work constantly. Some of you probably have recognized the fact that, because I've said it to you, right? Karen, you were first, so go ahead and tell us what you.
Well, I was going to say something about the appraisal contingency. Part of the attraction of getting a house that's a little bit in a lower price range than they had initially hoped was to have a little bit of room. And also in terms of waiving the appraisal contingencies, I've shown them the comms, because we want to make sure that the house appraises for the price of the loan, and I always meet the appraiser too for the comms. But it's still, in the eyes of the buyer, it's still a huge risk.
So Karen makes a really good point. Let's spend a minute on this, right? She makes a really good point, because if you listen to the words that Karen used, what she said was the appraisal in this world that we're living in needs to cover the amount of the loan, right? So the appraisal needs to match the sale price. What Karen didn't say was the appraisal needs to come in at market value, and then everyone needs to make a decision about market value versus over market value. Guys, if you're not talking with your buyers up front about the fact that market value is out the window, don't even say those words, because it's not a relevant part of our world right now. Market value is whatever the craziest person is willing to throw at the house. And then we worry about is there a risk of things not appraising? Here's my answer. Tammy, you can back me up or tell me I'm full of it. My answer is less so today than 6 months ago. And sometimes some of you are still in that world of there's no comps out there to support these higher numbers. And the more things that close, literally every single day that we continue in this market, the appraisal risk goes down, because more and more properties that have taken offers and closed in this crazy world that we're in right now are available as comps, right? And so even though things continue to kind of spin out of control, I've also seen appraisers move back to market adjustments. I've seen them move back to multiple offer. I don't know what you call it exactly, but like a multiple offer adjustment, knowing if they have more information and know darn well that the house they're appraising that's supposed to appraise for 700 and was listed for 625 had 13 offers on it, that helps them move things to help cover any perceived gap, right? So Lou's talking in specifics, and he's saying that appraisers are part of a lagging, they're a lagging metric, and he's 100% right. Those lagging metrics are catching up to help give you more power today.
Right, Rick, what you just said, if you have a neighborhood and then, one house sells, 75,000 over, you still have the comps in that neighborhood that are at the old market price.
That's right. That's
so
right.
Then another one sells, and then then eventually you that's what I mean. There's a lag, right?
Yeah. So the point, I think, go ahead, Karen.
I have a quick question, and that is, for an exclamation clause, you want to have copies of the offers that you want to top. If you were going into an appraisal and the comps, obviously just the last 60 days or last 90 days, but if they've had multiple offers, would it be appropriate to say to the listing agent, look, the appraisal is coming up, I'd like to give the appraiser a copy of the other offers that came in, because we are going neck to neck, obviously without the name and all that. Would that
sure,
be appropriate to ask them?
Yeah, if the listing agent and the seller is willing to kind of hand those over to assist in the appraisal process, as long as the names are redacted, I think that's a spectacular idea, because now the appraiser has some concrete evidence and is not just taking your word for it. I love that. Okay. I love it.
I just had an appraisal come in from New York that came in $50,000 above already above ask price, because that's what the agent did.
Yeah, there you go. It's a great idea, and when you think about it, it is absolutely in the seller's interest to disclose that information, such that you don't run into appraisal issues, right? One last thing on appraisal issues, and then we'll go to Alice. And I've got a hand. What's the rest of B? Tell me who that is.
Brian Snipe.
Oh, hey Brian, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. So let me finish this. We'll get to Alice and then circle right to you. So the other piece of appraisal is this, guys. Be careful that you're not solving a problem that doesn't exist. And so some of you are writing offers and having these discussions with your buyers, and you're so fearful that the property won't appraise that you're not writing strong enough offers. And if you feel that way, you're communicating it either verbally or non-verbally to the buyer, right? What I would say to you is cross that bridge when you get there. because oftentimes you think there'll be an appraisal issue and there's not.
Mhm.
I find in the last 3 to 6 months, appraisal issues just continue to go down and down and down and down and down. It doesn't mean we've eliminated them, and yet there's always a way to solve it. So I wouldn't get caught up in, oh my goodness, the appraisal, it might not appraise. Write the strongest offer that the buyers are willing to write, stand behind it, and then if the appraiser needs some help closing a gap, we'll get them some help in closing the gap. Cross that bridge when you get to it. Don't solve it too early, because I think it skews you. Go ahead, Alice.
I think I forgot my question. No.
Yeah.
No, I was just talking to 2 young women who I'm going out with tonight for the second time in their renewed search for a home. And I was telling them, because I've been showing them listings that have been going to highest and best over, ask the whole 9 yards. And I warned them, because she said, well, how about a letter? I said, yes, lots of people are using letters. And I said, but also people are waiving mortgage contingencies and appraisal contingencies. And so she said, well, aren't those there to protect us? I said, yes, they are. But in an effort to get a house, this is what people are willing to do. So I just want you to know in advance that these are some of the things you're going to be facing, in addition to going over asking price or whatever else you may do. And terms and conditions always are most important. And you have to try and work with the other agent to see, maybe it's moving time or it's whatever. And so I think I planted that seed in them. We'll see how it works this afternoon.
Yeah, I love it. Well, and what I love about what Alice did was when the buyer said, well, wait a minute, aren't all those things there to protect me? Alice said, yes, absolutely they are. And the people you're competing with are willing to forego that protection. So that's what you're facing, right? Alice didn't go into a whole dialogue around, oh my, yes, and it's so important that you're 100% protected, and we're going to wrap you in as much bubble wrap as possible. Don't worry, I'm here to protect you. And guys, I can tell you that even though that feels like the right conversation sometimes, you're helping them fail before they've even started, right? By not being clear and upfront and just answering the question, yes, there was the protections, and others are willing to waive those protections. You'll have to decide whether or not you're willing to waive those protections as well. Great job. Brian.
So just 10 minutes ago, this situation just happened with me. My buyers had the accepted offer. We have a closing date for May 3rd. And now the appraisal just came back and it's 15,000 under.
Yeah.
So what kind of questions do you think that may come up that I'm going to be needing to answer?
So great question. And it brings us to the, what do you do if the appraisal comes in low, right? So there's a couple of different paths. Path number one is you pick up the phone and you talk with your loan officer. So right now we've got Tammy on the phone saying, okay, how are we bridging this gap? And Tammy will review the situation, right? The loan officer will review the situation and determine whether or not in this scenario, it makes sense to go and kind of push back on the appraisal. Maybe you go and try and challenge the appraisal. Maybe you have a conversation with the buyers that says, okay, so here's what that means. It doesn't mean that the house is worth any less, right? And that's the point I was making before, because you're willing to pay $480, and just because the appraisal came in at $465, it doesn't mean the house is worth less money. It means that in order for you to live there, you have to be willing to bring a little extra money to the table, right? If it's 80-20 financing, well, guess what? They only have to bring 80% of the gap more to the table, right? So it's a matter of doing the calculation that says, how much more do I have to bring to the table? Because the mortgage is only going to be written on the $15,000 less number. You see how? So it's not all of a sudden like they need to pay $15,000 extra. They're still paying the same $480. They just may have to put a little more down and finance a little less in order to move forward. So I have done that personally with investment properties that didn't appraise. Right? Okay, so I'll just switch around the money I'm bringing to the table and bring a couple $1,000s more to the table. Frankly, for me, I looked at it as a positive because now I had a lower mortgage payment and I had more equity in the property. So my net worth automatically goes up, right? So So the idea of flipping the conversation into an equity building conversation instead of a lower monthly payment, instead of a, oh my goodness, what are we going to do, helps. You can also go back to the seller and say, look, the property appraised for $15,000 less. We'd like for you to cover that gap, right? Lou said before that he had that happen recently, and the seller, I think it was Lou who said that, and the sellers came back and agreed to accept $15,000 less for the property. So sometimes that happens. And the other path forward is you can negotiate again. So it's a $15,000 gap. I've done this personally as well, where I went back to the seller and said, look, there's a $15,000 gap. I'll bring $7,500 more to the table if you'll reduce the sale price by $7,500. We can meet in the middle. I'm happy to do it. You still get close to what you were looking for. The bank will loan me the money. Everything will be happy. You'll still be able, and here's an important piece. You'll still be able to close on time, right? Because if sellers are interested in closing on time, them dumping you and going with someone else will not allow that to happen, because now all of a sudden you have somebody who has to start all over again and likely is going to run into the same issue. So unless there's a cash offer that's sitting on the side, they're going to run into those same issues, right? So the seller being involved in solving the problem is not off the table either. Those are all the paths. Does that help, Brian?
Yeah, because right now I guess the ball's in our court.
Yeah, so I would have a conversation with the buyers, see what they're willing to do, lay out all those options, maybe get the loan officer involved, and see where it all lies, right? If the loan officer says, you know, look, this is going to be tough to challenge because of X, Y, and Z, use their expert eyes on that. I wouldn't use your eyes on it. I would use the loan officer or the processor's expert eyes on that. And then see if that's the path. And if not, then you have, you know, path 1, 2, or 3. Buyer covers it, sellers covers it, or you negotiate, and see where they need to go, and then start having the conversations with the sellers.
All right, great, thanks. I'm going to do that right now.
Excellent, good luck. Alice, question?
Yes, how much pushback do you think you would get from a seller or the listing agent in a situation like that, where they might say, well, you know, we don't want to, so either you come up with the money or the deal is off the table and we'll go to the next offer?
Yeah, so I think it depends. You know, Lou was able to make it happen. I've personally been able to make it happen by simply positioning it. And my strategy is always, look, one of the things that we want to make certain is that we all still close on time, right? We all agreed to an April 30th closing date. And the way we can hit that closing date for you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, is to figure something else out here. And so, you know, I am willing to, you know, will you cover the numbers? Because some buyers have it and some buyers don't, right? If the buyers are right on the edge, sometimes they don't have an extra couple of $1,000s to put down. Sometimes they do and they don't want to. That sometimes you have to have a conversation, right? I didn't want to get up and run 5.5 miles this morning either, but I did it because the benefit long term, it outweighs the short term of it. Right. So sometimes you have to have some of those conversations.
Plus, they'd have to start all over again with inspections and all of that stuff. So it does, I guess, the closing on time is the key to the whole scenario. Well,
and again, unless they have a cash offer as the backup offer,
right,
the next appraiser is going to come and use probably the same comps because they're going to be doing it a week or two later.
Sure.
So it's not necessarily going to change. You're going to have to address this at some point.
So plus, it's in their best interest.
Exactly right. Plus, if you went with me as your best offer, oftentimes the best offer is going to be the best price and terms. And so if you're going to a backup offer, are you going to a backup offer that's already $10,000 less? So now are we only talking about $5,000 in terms of a differential, right? So it's helping everybody see the big picture and keeping people off of the, I want to be the winner. Okay, so we're only on number 4 and we've got 11 minutes left. So let me run through these. I can go probably 5 minutes over, so we have 15 minutes. Number 4, pay cash if possible. Sorry, Tam. Pay cash if possible, right? And what that means is if they have the cash, use the cash to win. Now, Tammy, what is it called when you refi like within a week after you close?
Delayed financing. And actually, they could be sitting at the closing table, and as long as they have taken ownership of the property, I hit submit and we start the refinance. It can only be on an 80% loan to value though, so keep that in mind. And there are private money sources out there.
So do you mean up to 80%? So 80% or lower LTV?
80% or lower LTV. So if the house is 400,000, you're not going to get a loan for 400,000. You're going to get a loan, or 500,000. You're going to get a loan for 400,000. So you still, so it's a 20% down payment. You have to keep that in mind too. Got it.
Right. And so, and you know, that's what we're doing. For those of you, are any of my Command Capital partners on this call today? I don't think so. I don't see any of you. But the KW Investment Group, which is formerly called Command Capital, we're closing tomorrow on properties, and because they're being written in LLC, I had to find commercial financing, and so what we're doing is we're paying cash, which means the bank, the commercial lender, is giving me $500,000 cash as like a line of credit. And then as soon as we own them, we're going to convert each of them into an amortizing loan, right? So they're just different ways of looking at financing, that if your buyers have questions around that, have them sit down with Tammy and discuss it, right? Interest rates are low enough that even if the interest rate is a smidge higher for a delayed financing, like an immediate refi, which they probably will be a smidge higher, they're still ridiculously low. Like, what's the difference between 3 1/4 and 3 5/8? Like almost nothing, right? So pay cash if possible, and look at other versions like delayed financing to present as cash to help you win. Number 5, if they're not waiving inspections, or even if they are and they're still doing them, right? When people waive inspections, I still encourage them to do them. They're just doing them for their own education purposes, right? You still have to learn how to use your new house. So the inspection's still important. Pre-schedule those inspections for literally like the next day. So if I'm presenting Karen an offer for my buyers today on her listing, I'm going to have already pre-scheduled the inspection for tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. So that one of the things that I can say to Karen as the listing agent is, look, all your folks have to do is say yes to us, and we are ready to go tomorrow morning at 10 with the inspector. Anybody else that you say yes to, you may have to wait up to a week. And that's time off the market for you. We want to make certain that, right? So regardless of whether you're waiving or not waiving, have those things lined up immediately so that you present as a stronger candidate, because the seller will look at that and say, all right, so if something's going to go sideways from the inspection, I want that to happen in 24 hours, not a week, right? Because a week later, a lot of their other backup offers may be gone. So they want to make decisions fast. Number 6, put more down. And what I mean by that is, even if someone's doing 80-20 financing, right, and 20% is going down, stop this whole write a check for 1% thing. You've got to start upping the game on that and show the sellers that you are strong with money by putting more down up front. What I do personally when I'm buying my investment properties, which sometimes I have to fight for, I just put the whole 10% down right up front. Here, take my $20,000, take my $50,000. Is there more quote unquote at risk all of a sudden? Well, sure, I guess so. You could look at it that way. But how many scenarios, right? If you add up all the years of experience on this Zoom call right now, how many of us actually have had numerous, maybe we've had one in our lifetimes in real estate, where somebody had to fight over the deposit and the seller kept it. It just happens rarely, right? That doesn't mean it's not possible, but it's not probable. So to me, I'd rather present stronger and put a whole bunch of money down up front because you look stronger. Number 7, write a buyer letter, or have the buyers write a buyer letter and deliver it with the offer. Yes, I know the MLS says that these are terrible, horrible things and that listing agents shouldn't be accepting them. And some listing agents might not accept them. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't have your buyer write it and you shouldn't include it. It humanizes the buyers. It creates commonality oftentimes with the sellers, right? I've had people say yes to my folks because they raised 3 boys and my buyers had 3 boys. I've had people say yes to my buyers because they were a military family and my buyers were from a military family, right? If you can walk through the house and find some kind of commonality and then have the buyers push that in a letter and have them gush about how wonderful they think the property is and all that stuff, you sometimes are the winner, right? On the buyer's agent side, when you have the buyer write it and you're just facilitating it along, there is no, you can underline the no, there is no real risk of fair housing issues. That doesn't mean it will never happen, because you never say never. But this whole idea that these buyer letters somehow violate fair housing is especially when you represent the buyer, is absurd. There is some risk on the when you represent the seller, and we're going to talk about that in our risk reduction class. So watch for that, and we'll guide you through how to use them. So use those letters as much as possible, and then don't make a big deal if the listing agent says, "Sorry, we're not accepting those." Then just take it out, or tell them to take it out and present the rest of the offer, right? Every once in a while, I hear someone saying, well, and I fought with that listing agent to make sure that my letter got presented. Guys, that doesn't make you the favored child. It just makes you sound annoying and argumentative, right? So don't do that, right? Advocacy can turn negative as well. You can be a negative advocate for somebody as well if you start to be the problem child. Number 8. Make some part of the down payment that you just put down non-refundable. So say you're putting a whole 10% down. Maybe what you say is, look, say yes to us and 50% of our down payment is non-refundable. Unless you, the sellers, change the rules, change your mind, or decide not to sell the house or whatnot, right? If you dump us, obviously it's refundable. But it's non-refundable from our side, which means we're buying the house. Or if we change our minds and walk away from this property, you get to keep $5,000 or $10,000 or $20,000 or $1,000 or whatever you want to make non-refundable. I have seen that work really well because now sellers feel like you are committed. One of the things that sellers sometimes struggle with in a multiple offer situation is, will I pick the right person who will be committed? And if I don't, will the person who is committed still be around? That's what they struggle with. So show them how committed your buyers are. Have your buyers say, you know what, we are so committed that we're willing to put $20,000 on the line. We're willing to risk $8,000 and it's non-refundable. Once you countersign our offer and say yes to us, that money is yours, whether we buy it or not.
I would rather do that. That is actually less riskier than the appraisal, the mortgage contingency, the other stuff you guys are afraid of. To walk away with $5,000, yeah, it sucks, but you know what? It's not the whole 20% down payment.
Yeah. So again, using a scale, balance out what the buyer's risk tolerance is, right? And understand that these strategies are there to help everybody at each step of that risk tolerance. A little more risk averse, then go with something a little safer. If a little more risk tolerant, then go with something a little less safe. Number 9, offer a portion of the commission that you would earn as a further incentive to the seller. You want to stand out? Be the one buyer's agent who says, don't just tell the buyers that you'll rebate them 0.25% or rebate them $2,500. Because now the seller doesn't have anything to do with that. Make a statement that once the buyers have maxed themselves and given exactly what they want to give at all out, that on top of that, you will credit the sellers back at closing 0.25% or $500 or $2,500, whatever it is you choose, of the buy side commission as an incentive for them to choose your buyers. And here's where that one came from. I was working with one of my private coaching clients, and she came to me and she said, you know what, I'm literally ready to pull my hair out because we have now lost enough houses that my buyers are no longer interested in buying. They've just soured on the entire experience. So guys, just because you have a signed buyer doesn't mean that you'll actually sell them a house. And so this strategy, as far as I can see it, says, look, I am so committed to you and so committed to having these buyers purchase this home, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. I'm willing to give up some of what you would pay me through the listing agency if you will choose them. Because earning a smidge less in some cases still gets you to the closing table and a paycheck, rather than with some of your buyers who are just going to say, you know what, I think I'm out. So I know some of you kind of cringed when I said that, and yet that's the rationale behind it. Because if you make a small amount less and still get to the closing table because you were able to help your buyers win, it's a win for everybody. Yes, you are buying their love. I understand it. Be willing to buy their love. Number 10. Offer a portion. Nope, that was number 9. Number 10. Have the buyers offer to pay the closing costs of the seller on top of a strong offer. Maybe you offer to pay up to $5,000 in conveyance taxes and attorney's fees. Maybe you don't put a cap on it. You'll cover all the conveyance taxes and the attorney's fees, so that when you choose these buyers, there's no actual cost to you to sell the house except paying the real estate commission. Maybe you say to the buyers, you know what? One of the things you could do is if you chose to cover my commission instead of the seller, that might be a winning point. So you make a strong offer and then you go back on top of the offer. Don't just build it in because then you don't get credit for it, right? On top of the offer, you get to go back and say, and the buyers have chosen to pay the buyer's side commission, which means 2.5 or 3% of the purchase price is also going into the seller's pocket. So you can just gross up the numbers from there, right? Just all these different ideas. Number 11, use escalation clauses. Christine, did you have a question? Sorry.
Yes, I'm sorry. I got a phone call and I didn't take the call, but the ringing, I didn't hear what you said. Can you quickly go over those giving up a portion of our commission? Do we bring that up to the other agent and work it out that way?
Yes. Yeah. And the reason for that is if you just say to the buyer, I'll give you money at closing, right? It's invisible. And so what you want to make it visible. And so on top of a really strong offer, you then want to be able to go to the listing agent and say, and on top of that, maybe you write a little form that says, Christine and Keller Williams Realty are waiving, $2,500 of our buy side commission as a credit, as an additional credit to the seller at closing. And so now on top of everything gets an extra $2,500.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So use escalation clauses is number 11. Frankly, guys, we're at a point now where escalation clauses used to be one of our aces in the hole because no one else was using them, or very few other people were using them, and now kind of everyone's using them. And I'm seeing more and more examples of listing agents coming back and saying, yeah, you know what, we're not accepting escalation clauses. Give us a number. Do sellers have a right to do that? Yeah, absolutely they do, right? If they choose not to deal with escalation clauses, so then you may be forced to just come up with an actual number, right? And yet use them if they can help, right? I'll come back, for anyone who doesn't know what escalation clause is, I'll come back to that at the end. I want to get through the last couple ones here. Number 12, make sight unseen offers to get to the table first. Make sight unseen offers to get to the table first. Being first, for some sellers, being first is a really big deal. So if your buyers can swing being first, it may be a benefit to them. And sometimes that means making an offer before you've walked through the property. Guys, let's face it. There's plenty of pictures. There's a virtual tour. There's a floor plan usually, right? You have so much information typically at your disposal that you can make preliminary decisions. The buyers can make preliminary decisions without having to walk through the property. And maybe you just make walking through the property a contingency so that they can get in there. Making offers sight unseen, and I wouldn't tell you to do it if I wasn't doing it myself. Last 3 properties I've purchased, I have not been inside. It's not the end of the planet. Will everyone love it? No. Will some people not love it and still do it because they're frustrated and want to win? Yes. We see it happening every day, right? And if you're still doing an inspection, you can walk through the property then. Number 13, if a mortgage is still being used, have the mortgage loan officer call the listing agent to go to bat for the buyers, right? That's a great idea. It's why we have people like Tammy on our side, because she'll call the listing agent and say, you know what, you'd be crazy not to accept Marissa Gilberti's buyers, the Smiths. This is the 3rd loan I've written for them. They are solid. They will get to the closing table, right? I've already reviewed their income and assets. I know you have a document from me, but I wanted you to hear directly from me that I have in fact reviewed all of that. It's been pre-underwritten, so we know there's not, unless some crazy thing happens, right? It should be smooth sailing. And we're ready to order the appraisal literally tomorrow morning as soon as you say yes to them. Right?
I also speak from the seller's point of view, where I will say to them, listen, you worked really hard to get to this listing. The last thing I'm going to do is have it fall apart now. So I will keep your seller up to date as to where we are in each milestone.
I love it. Number 14, use your relationships with listing agents. If you have relationships with listing agents, guys, now's the time to bring them out. If I've presented offers and worked deals successfully through with Marissa, and Marissa is not a colleague inside of the market center, I'm gonna push on that. Hey Marissa, do me a favor. Do you remember the last time that you and I worked together? How smooth and easy that was? Here's what I can promise you. I can promise you this will be even better this time. And it would be I would consider it a massive favor if you would communicate that, our ability to get to the closing table smoothly, to the sellers when you present this offer. I'm going to push on that and ask them to say those words for me. I want them to not only present all the offers, but if I used to do it all the time, I would present the 6 different offers. And one of the things I would say to the sellers is, and not for nothing, not that you asked, this particular agent and I work brilliantly together. She is professional. She knows how to handle buyers. There won't be any issues, right? And we'll close on time. So if that helps you in your decision making, she's a winner. The rest of them, I don't know well enough, or I know well enough to not be able to say that.
Just surprisingly, over everything, that actually won me like 3 or 4 deals last year.
Yeah. And it's also a reason not to be a jerk, right? If Marissa was a jerk, she couldn't utilize that as a tool. Great job, Marissa, not being a jerk. Number 15 was rework the price range of the buyers, and we talked about that as 1A. So it's either 1A or 15, however you're counting them. And number 16, letter writing ads and call-arounds. Letter writing ads and call-arounds. And what that means is market your buyers. So it's a slight deviation from getting your buyers to win a specific offer. But if you want buyers to have more opportunity, waiting and staring at the MLS each morning is not enough. It's just not enough. You've got to be on other sites looking for sale by owner properties. You need to be driving around the towns they want to live in, looking for sale by owner properties. You need to be driving around the towns they want to live in and seeking out properties. That looks like it could work. It's in the right neighborhood and looks kind of right from the outside for the Smiths. I should call that person and see if they have any interest in selling. Doing mailings and call-arounds and hanging door hangers in certain neighborhoods where you have buyers who want a property, right? That gives them more opportunity to make more offers, which increases your chances of winning. Guys, I know that took a little longer than I promised. I'm sorry, we're 10 minutes over, but that's my list. So recognize that there are a ton of things that you can do, a ton of things. Not every buyer is going to look to do every single one of them. However, out of those 16 different strategies, plus expectation setting, oh, and one last thing, make sure that your buyers understand that they don't get a second bite at the apple. You don't get to make an offer and then make a new offer. The offer that you're writing with them, they have to consider that is the only bite at that apple that they will get. You go in with as much strength as the buyers have the first time around. If all of a sudden they come back with, highest and best, well, then maybe you're already at your highest and best. But here's what I can tell you. If more buyers would come in with their ultimate strength right from the beginning, sellers wouldn't need to go to highest and best quite as often because they would have a clear winner many times. Oh, and here's another little tidbit. You're going to hear this next week at risk reduction, but guys, clean paperwork. Clean paperwork, which means everything is signed, which means your I's are dotted, your T's are crossed, all the right forms are there, and they're filled out completely and correctly. Nothing is missing. I know Amy's on this call, and I'm going to speak on behalf of Amy because she told me she had an offers on a property she put on the market a week or two ago. I think the number was 21 offers, and 12 of them she had to go back to listing agents and ask for rewrites, information, checks, signatures, forms that were missing. 12 of them. Guys, that is a pathetic average or ratio of complete offers versus incomplete offers. Remember, part of how you help your buyers win is to not have Amy Mosley irritated when she reviews your offer and it's incomplete. I know I speak on behalf of Amy. All right, guys, that's what I have for you today. I hope that was helpful. I hope you'll study these strategies and write the list out. If it were me, I might even do like a KW ad slick version of this so that you have something that you can use. In the meantime, if you want to create something yourself, I'll have the staff work on, here are the strategies for winning multiple offers with buyers so that you can use it almost like a checklist. We want to do this one, and this one, but not this one, and this one. All right, guys, hope that was helpful. Good luck with your offers. Let me know how I can help. I will see you soon. And if not, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Have a great afternoon. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.